Good evening, everyone, and welcome to OTF Webinars. This is, wow, math is useful. Looks like a terrific presentation. I always get the privilege of going through the slides first, and you're in for lots of ideas tonight. We welcome back Chris as a presenter. It's been a little while since he's done one, but I know he's been actively busy in Toronto, so really looking forward to this. And Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you. Enjoy the webinar. And Chris will just remind you to click the talk button. Well, that's a first for me. There we go.
Sorry about that.
Welcome. There we go. And here is Chris.
Sorry, I pushed the little microphone button on there instead. My name is Chris Knudsen. I am a teacher in Toronto School Board. I've been teaching for about 14 years. I have taught grades 4, 5, 6, 7, and most recently 8. So I've covered a pretty good chunk of the grades here that are probably being represented here. I wanted to, first of all, just got to warn you that I have a bit of a cough today, so if you hear me coughing, I really apologize for blowing your ears out with that, but we just had our 4th child, and I haven't been getting as much sleep as I thought I would, and because of that, I thought I was all heroic. You know, I've been great, no health problems. All of a sudden, I get my first cold here, and right before the webinar, which is fabulous. But yeah, so anyway, I've been teaching for about 14 years. Math has always been a pretty strong thing of mine that I've really enjoyed teaching, that I've wanted to teach, and that I've wanted kids to like. So I know that one of the biggest things early on that you guys probably heard was, why do we need to learn this, right? Or what's it useful for? Why do we do this? And so I set about trying to figure out how to do that. So I'm going to go through some things in this webinar. Hopefully that will help you. First of all, I'll just be introducing it. Second of all, I'll be going through some quick and simple one-day ideas, some structural things, some things, weekly things, just the quick ideas hopefully you can put into practice right away that if you aren't already doing them will help you make it a little, make it more interesting for the kids, make it more interesting for you. And also, in addition to that, I'll be talking about some medium-term assessments or projects, how to design them and figure out that ways, give you some examples of how to do that, that hopefully you'll be able to meet your interests, their interests, and you know, meet some world needs through these projects. And also, I'll be looking at some long-term class structures. There's some things I've used in my room. I've heard about some people using that is something you could put into your classroom over the course of an entire year that would build math more naturally into the classroom, you know, as a daily and management tool. So I have one guy, John Dewey, did a lot of research a long time ago, and his quotes I've always liked, especially this idea that school should not be preparation for life, but it actually should be life itself. So what they're doing in school is life. It's not you're doing this so you can do it outside the classroom, but rather you're living it right now and you're making use of it in the classroom. You're playing with it. It's something that you apply right away. Because we don't want to have this idea that school is isolated, and this happened. I know I did this a lot, where you do things like focus solely on textbooks. Not that textbooks are bad things, but just, you know, you get this idea, you have an idea of what school is, sitting at a desk, that kind of thing, and it tends to sometimes isolate what school is from how that might be applied in actual life. So hopefully today I'll be able to give you a few ideas of how to make this life happen in the math classroom. So again, just for my introduction, I want to be looking at some things to make math enjoyable in your daily routine. A short weekly schedule. I want to sort of give you an eye about how to get things started, or how to apply it across a week, on a weekly basis, and some of these larger cross-curricular ideas that make this bridge between what they're learning in class and just in everyday life. and these long-term ideas that you can put into place that may create this blend, an sort of cross-curricular blend that sort of plays out throughout the entire school year, and also might even help you with, or give you another way to format your classroom structure. So why do we need to teach math differently? Well, the students that really need to be daily practicing these skills. They need to be, just working on these skills, trying them out, playing with it, without trying to get rid of this idea of failure and being allowed to fail, because a lot of our learning comes from failure. See math being taught in a fun way, because for one thing, if you think it's fun, the students are going to think it's more fun as well. So when they see you having fun with it, when they see you doing things that they start to look forward to on a regular basis, they're gonna start doing math in a way that allows them to practice it more naturally. So first off, I want to show you this one video quick. It's from a website called ucube.org. By the way, this is a great website. It has tons of resources, tons of things to look at. So right now, Tricia's going to drop the link into the bar there. When you go to the web page, it'll look something like this. Scroll down, and on the right-hand side, you're going to see a video. It's a 3-minute video. Just take a look at that video, and when you're done, come back and just put a check, just to show that you're done beside your name there, and then I can see when everybody's back. So just take 3 minutes, take a look at that video, and give me a little check mark when you come back. Can anyone give me a thumbs up? Let's say thumbs up. Show me what to do. Any thumbs up out there? Hi. Yeah, I'm just gonna start while a few of the people are finishing up watching the video. Yeah, she's good. She's good. Got lots of neat stuff, some good books. Just some of the key ideas that came out of there, and Melanie said there, it's a lot of these students say I'm not good at math, and you hear that a lot from students. I'm not good at math. But actually, scientifically, we're all naturally good at math, and we all have intuition about math. We may think in different ways. We may approach problems from different ways. But just sort of the way school's been tends to go, just the format of it, sometimes can lead to this idea of that math is sitting at a desk taking a test, and if you can't, then you can't do the test, then you're not good at it. If you fail, that's it, and you're done. Whereas just in the video you saw, using these different models, keeping it visual, keeping it creative, encouraging, and not just you encouraging, but students encouraging each other, learning from these mistakes and figuring out new ways to do it. That's the way we solve problems in life, right? We don't when we're trying to figure something out, you don't go try and fix your kitchen drain, and then it doesn't work the first time. You're just like, I'm not good at it, and you just leave it, right? So you try and trying to get students the idea that attacking problems from different ways, and just simply learning to enjoy math. So I'm going to get into now some of these ways you can put these right away into your classroom, ways to make it enjoyable and have students start to really build this love of math and have it a regular center point and sort of a pattern to it in your class. So there's tons of questions that you can do, tons of things you can do to make your class, build this habit of math into your classroom. And I want to bring a few of them right here, and again show you this 1 week schedule that I use in my classroom, and I've used it from grade 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, and 8s. So it works really for no matter what grade you're in that range. I'm sure it works earlier. I just haven't been down there. So the first one, using games. First off, those using games. It's funny, they talk about using games and people are like, oh, what a waste of time. But you build in timed math, you build in cooperation, which is a real life skill. You build in this idea of challenge and the ability to fail and then come right back and do it again and learn from your mistakes immediately. I usually open up math with around 10 to 15 minutes of math games. I have usually try and do a double period of math every day, so I have an 80-minute block most of the time for math, but I have done it in 50-minute blocks and just 40-minute blocks, depending on how the schedule went. But I've tried to always make it an 80-minute block, with 10 to 15 minutes being these math games, where the students come in right away, they grab the games, and they play. Now, math games, they create this natural skill. When you're doing something like, again, I'm not saying these things are bad, but when you're doing something like, let's say, just a timed rote test, which I do some of those too, but timed rote tests, it's more of a focus on the test and less of a focus on building this natural use of mathematics. When you're playing math games like Math War, Cards War, or you're doing multiplication dice, or something like that, the kids are getting more into the game and forgetting about the math. And while that sounds kind of counterintuitive, forgetting about the math actually makes them better at using the math, because they're not so focused on making those mistakes and the clock as they are on the game. And if you think about the way math is used in life, when we're using math in life, we're using it secondary and naturally as a supporting tool to whatever we're really trying to accomplish. If you're driving your car and you're using geometry to figure out which angle to take, but you're not thinking about calculating, the Pythagorean theorem or something like that. You're naturally using these skills, and you're building them by having these skills run in the background. Math games for those first 10 to 15 minutes creates this opportunity. There's a lot of teamwork games that you can use, collaborative games, and I have attached a link, I think it's on the next slide here, with it's just a list of games you can use. They're all over. You can look them up really quick, but I wanted to include at least one list of games so that you have something to start from. But definitely keeping games. And one of the best games actually for math I've found is Monopoly. And it's a pretty cheap game to pick up. A lot of people have it and donate it. Students can bring it in. But Monopoly, if you think about it, it's tons of probability. It's strategic thinking. It's constant basic math skills. It's even working on your 10 times and 4 times multiplication skills with when you're rolling the dice for the utilities. I actually found Monopoly was one of the best, and you can include a lot of students. Up to, I think it's 6 students can play the game at one time. So Monopoly has actually been one of, not that I'm working for whatever company sells Monopoly, but I've found it's been a good one. But also just a dice from the dollar store, decks of cards from the dollar store, Math War, those kind of things have been good at the beginning of classes. Here we go. Yeah. So so this resource here, it's all it is just a list of math facts, dice and card games that you can use and take a look at. So if you could drop that in the chat bar there, these ones will give you some starting points for doing the math games. A second one is these TED Talk math programs. I saw someone using these, and I started using them in my classroom as I call them TED Tuesdays. You'll see on the schedule. And so instead of the math games on Tuesdays, I do one of these TED problems. And the way it works like this is I watch the video for the first bit till it asks you the question. You pause the video, students discuss and work on the question together, and then you watch the end of the video to check and see what's going on. So I've included both links here. This is if you could drop the one in the list there, Trish, into there, and you guys want to just go quickly, take 2 minutes and just look at that, what the videos look like. This is just one problem called the birthday problem. There's tons of these. There's ones for different strands. If you could take just 2 minutes, look at it. Don't watch the whole thing, but come back, put the check mark up as soon as you're done. That'd be great. So just take 2 minutes and just take a look at what these look like, and we'll come back. Yeah, so I found that students have really enjoyed, just another way to get them into it, get them talking, get them discussing problems, and there's so much variety on there of lessons to use that can match up with a lot of the subject matter that you're discussing in class, and I found that the kids have just gotten really into it. Some of them even started watching them at home or trying them at home on their own. Even ones that I haven't even looked at in class, and it's been kind of nice to see just something else to put up there, a good resource to try again using this math in a fun environment, get them really enjoying what they're doing and seeing how things can be applied. There's even ones that are cross-curricular with science, and you probably saw, and anyway, they're pretty good. So this is what a sample weekly math structure could look like. Just the regular week-to-week thing. This is what I use. So I do math and dice games 3 days of the week. I do the TED Tuesdays. I do this little final thing called Problem of the Week to wrap it up. Now, the way a Problem of the Week works is the whole week basically is a single unit. So it begins with a weekly goal, and the goal is what the focus is for the entire week, the entire lesson focus. The problem of the week wraps it up. Now, the weekly goal I usually keep on the board, and I put it up there. All it is just an expectation. So if it's, let's see, by the end of the week, you'll be able to multiply 2-digit by 2-digit numbers or something like that, right? Then that goal will be up there, and they'll know the whole entire week that all the lessons are focused on that, and that there will be some sort of a goal assessment at the end of the week that will wrap up that goal. And so every week we'll kind of have this structure throughout the whole time. Now, for problems of the week, there's some ways that I do it, and basically the whole last day is doing a problem of the week. And I do this by doing individual math problems, or group challenges, or actually a third one which I have after, which is level test, but it's sort of like the math journals. So I kept it under that thing. Now, this one, the University of Waterloo has their own problems of the week, and they're archived, so you can go back and actually find ones that match up with whatever strand you're working on, whatever your goal for that week is. If you could just drop that into the bar, and it's got tons of good problems there that you can work on either in their math journals or with these group challenges or with these problem of the week leveled quizzes I'll show you here next. So after this, so for the group format, I usually get them to, again, using this collaborative work. You think about this. We're trying to build this bridge between what is real life, as they call it, and what is happening in the classroom. Well, one of the main skills we need to work on is this whole idea of collaboration. And one of the things that people who work out there in the world know is that no matter what you do together as a group, at some point in time it comes down to your individual prowess, because you have to work with different people, and whatever you put down is there. So the way I arrange group work is on, let's say I'm using a chart paper, I usually use chart paper to do this, and I'll divide it up into sections. I call this or I heard it somewhere, I can't remember, the 4 quadrants method. So each person stands at a corner. So the paper is laid out on a desk. They each stand at a corner. They write their names in their quadrant, or groups of 3. I do it in triangles. And then they can only do their work in their section. So you cannot write on anyone else's section. So whatever's in their quadrant will be their work. Now what you can do is you can verbally, or on a scrap piece of paper, whatever you need to do, teach the person in their quadrant how to do the problem, or show them what they're missing. But that person then has to do the work themselves. Now, you say to yourselves, well, is there some time where there could be copying or something like that? Well, yeah, but if you're thinking about what they're doing, they're trying to show them and demonstrate to them, and the person then has to write it down. So the process of writing it down and just going through it even gives them their own individual opinion. And what you'll notice is people do their own work. They don't generally tend to copy what the other person did. And it'll be in their own handwriting. You'll see how they described it, plus you're walking around the whole time. And then I get them to cut out their quadrant and then hand in their quadrant to me. So that this is one assessment I use where they're helping each other out, they're talking, and they hand in their work to me. So that's one way I do the problem of the week. Another way is just putting the problem up and getting them to do it in a math journal, so just in their workbook. But there's also this one idea I like that's called is a leveled problem of the week. And the way it's done is like this. You divide up your problem of the week into 3 parts: part 1, part 2, part 3. And each of these sort of corresponds to a level. So if they have something written, the way it works, they get a level 1. If they finish part 1, so the first set of questions, they get a level 2 for their basic knowledge. If they finish part 1 and 2, they get a level 3. So they've done both of those, they get a level 3. If they finish part 1, 2, and 3, then they get a level 4. So it's a quick check to do this. And what it looks like is something like this. Oops, sorry, I didn't originally put this in, but I figured, oh yeah, I didn't come up with these type 1, type 2, type 3 questions. They come from Robert Marzano's book, Classroom Assessment and Grading That Works. Excellent book if you have read it or get the chance to read it. It's an older book. It came out in 2006, I think, but it's still really good for creating these assessments, especially if you're trying to create your questions so that they're level. And this is kind of what it looks like on paper. It's very small, and I have it again on the next page, but I'll have it like this, and this is what their question will look like. And all they'll do is they get their paper like this. I have the rubric on the top of the paper. They just flip it over and do all their work on the back. These 3 questions take them an entire class period to do. And here's the funny thing. It's like, oh man, and this is grade 8, by the way. They're like, oh man, you think, man, this is just another test, right? But the thing is, when I call it a problem of the week, and I write these questions to try and correspond with their interests from an interest survey that I'll show you here in a second, and they actually really enjoy doing these things. Sometimes I get them to do these in the group format, like I showed you before. Sometimes I get them to do them just on the back of the paper, like I just told you. But they really enjoy doing these things. It's just a quick check, a couple questions. It's not a major test, but they do the whole class. And it's all about showing what they know on these things. And if they get to part 1, like I said, they get a level 2. Part 1 and 2, they get a level 3. Part 1, 2, and 3, they get a level 4. That's the way it works, basically. So a little clearer to see it here. These problems, like the part 3 problems, those ones are often good ones to get from that University of Waterloo site, or you can find those in textbooks. There's often some good questions in textbooks. You can pull them out. They're basic knowledge. But I found this has been one of the best ways to show what they know as a wrap-up at the end of that week's schedule that I showed you. All right. So up until now, that first section was all about giving you something that hopefully you can use right away. That schedule, some games, some tools you could put into practice right now, and maybe get things so that they're used to a pattern, so that they get used to this idea of making math more natural through the use of games and and all that. But I want to talk to you now just about how to create some and base projects on interests. Because if you really want to connect with students, like we said before, the first thing that usually happens when you talk to students about math, they're like, why do I need to know this? Or what's the point in doing this? Or I don't like this. So if you use these three things to create your larger projects, based on your interests, their interests, and societal needs, keeping all three of these things in mind for when you're creating your projects, for different projects, you'll find that you get a lot more buy-in into the projects. A lot of the times what I found when I was first starting to create my own projects was I would base it on my interests, and that's it. The projects I would do are, because I'm interested in building things, they'd be mostly building projects, or they'd be mostly things, but I wouldn't be taking into account student interests. For instance, one of the things that almost never appears in my head is creating a project based on art, because that's just not been something that I generally gravitated towards. So I would start getting students kind of going, oh, another building project, or another project about space, or something like that, and I was like, and I'd lose buy-in sometimes after a few months or whatever of creating these projects. I'm like, what's going on here? Because I was avoiding their personal interest. I was leaving out entire valued parts of what they believed to be valid, their personal interests. So things like art that appealed and drama that appealed to these students, I was just leaving by the wayside. The third one, societal needs for math projects, draws in this whole idea of how math is used to make our world a better place, and that's something they don't usually see when they're doing their work, their questions in their textbook or whatever. They might get a question on how much money was collected from the local food drive or something like that, but they don't really see how, don't get to actively play with and develop projects that meet a societal need. So when you start making these projects so that they focus on some sort of a societal need, you'll see, okay, you see the kids kind of get into it. And especially I'll show you one later that I did that the kids really, really enjoyed, because it made an actual difference. The projects they made went out to society, and they could see the difference it made. So you just think about yourself. What interests you? Sports, finance, art, entertainment, all these different things that you could be developing your projects about. So there's a number of ways to, and you might have used these kind of things before. SurveyMonkey, Kahoot, Poll Everywhere, Socrative, Google Forms. All of these they work really well. I mostly have used the last one, Google Forms, mainly because we have Google Classroom, and we use Google Docs in TDSB. Out of curiosity, who has access to Google Classroom? If you could just give me a check mark or an X if you don't have access to Google Classroom, and check mark if you do have access to Google Classroom in your school. Yeah, so looks like most of us have access to Google Classroom. So I suggest using Google, not that any of these other ones aren't good, but Google Forms work well if you use, especially if you use Google Classroom, and it's easy to get because it's right there in your in your in the AW or whatever you guys use, and because it's in your particular board, I assume it's in your board's system, you also have access to the student emails and their parents' emails, and you can send these things out to both the students and their parents. It just makes things a lot easier. So that's what I use. So I just want you to take a quick fill out this form. It won't take you 2 to 3 minutes. It'll probably take you 30 seconds. But if you could go fill out this form on your interests, and then I'm just going to pop it up here and just kind of see what we come up with for what we like to do in just our own personal interests and how we might think that affects project making. No, give me a check when you get back. Okay, so I got most of your responses now. I'm just going to start loading up and sharing this screen with you to show what those responses look like and what the survey looked like, and it'll take a couple seconds to go here, so I'll just get it starting right now. The circle is very slowly spinning, so it should be coming up anytime. Still loading up. So one thing I always find about using technology, I have a smart board in my classroom, and whenever you're trying to get these things to go, the little doomed circle spins, and you're kind of like, man. Anyway, that's a good idea. So I'll keep trying to load this thing up here for a second, but I'll just tell you what I see, what I see on here. So what I've noticed is a great variety of what people like in there for their favorite subjects. So that means if sometimes you'll see a heavy focus on math or a heavy focus on art, and you may want to lean your activities more towards those subjects. Sometimes you see that, and it might be something you're not comfortable with. In this response here, I see, like I said, it's pretty spread out, both in favorite and least favorite, which gives you a bit of freedom then, since there isn't a big concentration. An interesting thing here is the groups. Now, according to this survey, 64% of the people in this group here like to work in small groups, and almost 40% like to work alone. Now, sometimes when I've done surveys, I've noticed that alone component went as high as 70%. Now, just in a quick comment down there, I think I'm going to stop this loading thing. It's not really loading up. Quick comment there. What would that mean if a large proportion of your students, 70% or something, wanted to work alone? How would you change what you do? What might be something that you would do with that? If you could just type an answer down there somewhere. I guess one thing, if if it was the case that a lot of people like, oh, there we go, sorry. Where's it? See someone type something, where's that? See someone is in the process of typing. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Yeah, so varying your group sizes. So even though some students want to work alone, you also know it'll be good for them, but you won't want to overwhelm them with really large groups, right? You want to also be more sensitive to the fact that by creating groups, there's 70% of your students that either need to learn how to work in a large group, and you need to spend more time teaching them actually how to work in these groups, or maybe you just do some large groups, you're trying to do some more individual stuff, but it helps you at least have a sensitivity of the way that you focus these. Again, you may notice that the interests in the group match yours completely. And you, okay, well then I'm good, I can do my interests, I can do theirs, but you can also push them and yourself with creating projects that are outside of your comfort zone, but then you know that it's outside of all of your comfort zone. Or if there's projects that if they all like something you don't, then you can create your projects so that so even if you do something that you're interested in that maybe they aren't right away, you'll expose them to something new, and they challenge you to create things that are again outside of your comfort zone. So anyway, taking the survey just really helps with giving these, with focusing on, at least becoming cognizant of what the challenges are and what people are interested in. So an interesting one is the visual. So some people, they might need more, like if they're more interested in art, they might need more projects or might work better with projects that have less language in them. Right? They might work better on projects that are more visual based. So anyway, it's a good way to figure out how to form those projects. For basing on my needs in society, usually what I do is we look at newspapers just straight from our social studies, current events or something like that, and we'll start looking about things like, oh, there's issues of poverty in our society, or it's happening around the world. How is math applicable to do this, or what projects can we make that would be math-based that would meet these needs? So, and it helps them connect. Again, focus on the issue, and the math becomes a natural secondary process they use to meet this particular need or attempt to meet this need. So again, you're trying to focus on the application, and the math becomes a supporting structure instead. So just for example, like my design projects, like I said, one thing I've done is just for instance for a science and math integration project is break students up into firms. Now a lot of people, especially in grade 5, grade 3, do these bridge projects, but you make it so that firms have a certain amount of money maybe that they start out with, and there's a reward at the end of it. So some sort of reward of class points, Dojo points, which I'll get to here in a second, different types of awards, and you connect it, hey, in society we have these projects, our government actually commissions these projects so that, and there is, some sort of a gain from this. So they have to take their money, let's say, the money that you lay out to them, and they invest it in the project. So they're buying into it. You take that, you connect it to some actual real societal need, and a real project that happens in society, and you get them to use math to meet this. But the math again is supporting and naturally underneath the main topic, which is the project. Just out of curiosity, when it says when you judge a winner, I usually get other teachers, or when I have awards involved, I get other teachers or the principal and vice principal or something like that to do the judging, because if it's you doing the judging, just you alone, then sometimes parents cry bias or something like that. So anyway, if you have one of these things that's based on prizes or judging, I'd usually bring in principal or some outside judge, parents, something. So just for an example, like the lesson there was using tally marks. And on the bridge project, we just created a simple list of materials and what each group was taking from the materials pile, and they just tallied up the materials they're using. So again, the lesson for the math at that time was tally marks, but tally marks were just a supporting something naturally they were using as they were doing the project. So always think, how can I make these projects so that the math is naturally applied to the situation? The same project, we actually brought in, we had done angles and geometry in the past, and they drew blueprints using all that. But again, the idea was focusing on the issue, which was building the bridge, but we drew the blueprints using the principles that we learned earlier about angles and measurement and all of that. So so again, having the math underneath the main goal or the main project idea, it makes that natural integration take place. Now, one thing I would really recommend is in order to get to naturally use algebra, because I know a lot of teachers have said they've struggled with the whole idea of using algebra in class, other than just doing, like equations like 5 plus x equals 12 or something like that. They said, well, how can you incorporate algebra naturally? How can you make that be applicable in a real life situation? So like, run around and see x's and things like this. And the way that I've done it, and I actually started doing this as using my own kid as a guinea pig. My son was coming out of grade 2, and he wanted to design something. So in the summertime we were working on doing this bridge project with him. And instead of I started thinking, because I'd been playing around with this idea, instead of using measurements, like saying the bridge is 11 centimeters long, I got him to choose, I'd say it was 2 blank tall. So like 2, underscore whatever tall, right? So then he wouldn't say, oh, it's 11, this measurement is 11 centimeters. He would say, well, I want to use toothpicks, so it's 2t tall, 2 times the number of toothpicks tall. And by doing that, then you also have this interesting thing take place where you can scale your projects you're working on. So if you're working on a bridge, and the bridge is 3x tall, right? 3, that's the height of the bridge. Then you could say, well, what if we use popsicle sticks? So 3p tall. Then they calculate, okay, 3 times p, and then they start using their multiplication to figure these things out. And it involves, and they start saying, oh, and you can even bring up conversations. Well, what happens if I change the size of it? What happens to my whole bridge if it used to be 3t, 3 for toothpicks, and I change it to 3p, 3 popsicle sticks? What happens to the whole bridge? And they're like, well, now it's bigger because popsicle sticks are bigger, and they have these conversations come out. So I really encourage using variables instead of measurements. Now, you can incorporate measurements into it by then measuring the length of the toothpick. And then you substitute in for t, you can just put in 11, and you use 3 times 11, so it's 33 centimeters high if a toothpick is 11 centimeters high. But I really found that worked well, and even, like I said, even my son, who was just entering grade 3, was able to handle this when he started looking at these bridges and his designs and saying, oh, because we didn't even know what parts we wanted to use yet, popsicle sticks or toothpicks. So by doing that, it also allows you some freedom in the materials you choose. So this way of incorporating variables into just whatever you're doing, really made a big difference. It made a big difference with my son. It made a big difference with my grade 8s. It worked with my grade 5s. I didn't try with any other grades, just those ones, but I really like that idea of using variables instead of absolute measurements and then substituting in measurements later. It helps them develop a natural feel for it. Anyway, but and you can do all sorts of things to bring these in and make these connections. So you could introduce probability into it by saying, okay, thinking reasonably about these things. How would your costs change? How would your design change if earthquakes happen only every 300 years? How much would your costs change if earthquakes happen only every 200 years? Because do you need to use more materials to strengthen your bridge? Does it matter it happens once every 300 years? These kind of conversations then become natural because of the and they start thinking about the application instead of just getting confused by the math. I've found doing this natural, just making these projects focus on the project and using the math as a support really helps develop this natural thinking and realistic thinking towards math. As far as the societal needs go and aiming your projects towards societal needs, one thing we came up with was this idea of well, what can we use math for? And they said, well, let's meet a need. And one need that we had was a class in the school wanted placemats that they put down on their desks so the students in these it was a lower grade than us could use to deal with fractions. And so what we did was we used the project as a pretest. And they made these placemats, and I'll show the picture of them in a second, that were then given to lower grades. The students took great ownership over this, and even students who going into this, and it was fractions, they struggled with fractions, but because they were creating it for someone else, they were making these, and they knew the people they were going to, like they knew their faces, they knew who they were. They made sure that they did their best work, they researched it, they figured out exactly what was wrong, and when they went into their fractions, our actual fractions work, their base was so good because they had spent so much time, again, focusing on the project and learning the math and using that as a base. They naturally learned how to do fractions better than me just even doing a review from them or talking at them about it. And this is what they came up with. And one of these students actually really struggled with math, and I don't even know if you would know which one it is. So they created these review placemats, and then, again, use it as a pretest for the lower grades, made sure that they went through it all, checked it over, learned it all, made it sure they demonstrated it was clear, but they were so concerned with the project that the math became was used naturally because they knew what good the math was being used for. Again, just focusing on creating quality projects, and they really learned by knowing why they were doing it. Another interesting one that I've incorporated, and I incorporate this with something I'm going to show you for the long-term projects I'll show you at the end, is this whole idea of this is a probability project of a wheel of fate. This one's actually on the OTF financial literacy website, but this whole idea of the wheel of fate, this whole lesson's up there. Students create these probability wheels that have different possibilities on them. They have different slices depending on what happens, and decide on a cost, because we did this again with money, and how much they might need to save for each possibility happening to them. So when they paid, we actually used money, but you could also do it with Dojo points or any other points used in the classroom, something like that. But they get this idea, again, they naturally think they think of a probability, what's the possibility of it happening, because it has a real effect on them. The same way, and I go through this in life, things happen, things come up. What do you think, and how do you feel about these different possibilities? and what possibly would you, and like they could feel how nervous they get depending on the slice of the pie. So a wheel of fate might look something like this. These are all equal slices, but you can change the slices depending on, and again, this comes from that OTF financial literacy website. The taxes, maybe taxes would actually be a bigger slice because of what happens to you every year. You know what's coming. You can prepare for it. A trip to the doctor. You can say emergency trip, a car accident. Can you prepare for it? Well, what's the odds? Maybe it'd be actually a smaller slice, right? And they create these wheels and spin them, and they say, okay, depending on what happens, what do you need to save? And then maybe even go to the front of the class. And what I would do is I would do this once a week. Randomly, we'd spin the wheel, and someone would get hit with a fine, or they'd win some money or something, and they would use our class money, which is for a year-long thing that I'll show you at the end of near the end of the presentation in the long term. Another one. This comes from this idea of doing these art auctions. Came from like I said, those surveys where I found out I wasn't doing any art for the students. Not any, but I was doing very little art, a lot less than what they wanted me to do. My grade 5s one year, they were like, well, can we do something with art? So I'm like, okay, how can we build this and make something art so that it's something real they can hang on to, something that mimics something outside. And we talked about what auctions are. We used our class money for this. And we actually created what I did was we created some just geometric art. And I had to look it up and talk to the art teacher and everything because, like I said, that hasn't been my specialty. But we actually used angles and mathematics. But again, they were focused on the project and not focused on the actual math. The math was supporting and natural because they were so focused on what their project was. And they created these works of art. And then we put them up, we auctioned them off, and then students could then display them on their desks, but could also buy and sell them from each other. So, I had students having this art hanging off the desk, and people were proud of it, and they took pride in what they were doing. They even started, and this is what I really like to see, doing art on their own, but not just any art. They started practicing with the math we were using in class and doing similar art and extending it and doing, it was started out 2D and they started messing around with 3D shapes, which we hadn't even gotten to at the point where they were starting messing around with 3D shapes, and they started reading about it on their own. Because for me, the whole idea is, will they want to start pursuing this on their own because they can see this link? I had one student whose parent was actually an artist, then came in because they got so excited about it. They wrote their parent in. Their parents started showing their art and talking, the golden ratio and all these different math-related concepts that golden ratio and drawing faces or something like that. And all this came out of them focusing on the project and developing the art naturally as a base underneath it. Always focusing on keeping that natural interest in what they're doing. Another one that was this idea of doing a fun run. So, students knew what a fun run was. They were already able to connect with it. But what we were able to do is organize a fun run for some different classes that actually ended up participating in it, and we ended up doing it was a mock run. We didn't raise real money at this time. I kind of wish we would have, but it was the whole idea of hey, let's raise money. Let's figure out a fundraising event, and we created formulas to see how, if we have X amount of participants, and you want to raise whatever, then you get the how much do you need to raise per student or something like that to get the money that you want. But again, it wasn't about the math. I did this one in groups in one of those group work projects. Is where you each work in your own corner. They all work together to come up with different formulas and check them over and decide on what the formula was, and then they invited a number of students to meet the need. And it was just interesting because they took charge of it and they actually applied math because they saw the project and the math was just natural and supporting. So again, I really just, I talked a long time about this making things scalable using variables. Try that out, and I want to say here, here's the underscore. For some of the younger grades, I would always start with an underscore showing that there's something missing, and then change it into an applicable variable like the T for toothpick or P for popsicle stick or something like PC for paperclip or something like that for that. All right. So finally, I want to just go over a couple of long-term ideas. Now, by long-term, I mean something that helps you structure your classroom so that math sort of permeates throughout your daily routine and in the way you organize your classroom. Ways that make you practice these concepts daily and naturally, because I found for myself the way I found that students really started getting, especially things like their basic facts down, was when daily they used it through the games and through these long-term structures. Helped develop this class, help them use it all the time naturally, again, supporting this system within the classroom. All right, so the projects I mentioned earlier often can be used using these long-term structures. So the first one is this idea of using Class Dojo. It's a really cool website. I actually haven't used this myself. I just met another teacher who used it, and I really like this system because it's basically a currency system. Where teachers can, I'm curious, does anybody use Class Dojo before I start talking too much about it? Does everybody use Class Dojo? Need a little check if you use Class Dojo. Anybody? Or an X if you don't use Class Dojo. Okay, good. So this is something that will be new for for most of you. Then it looks like it's new for me. I just found out about it from another teacher, and I really enjoyed using this or watching them use it, I should say. So Class Dojo, it's free to sign up, and each kid gets an avatar, and when they're doing something in class, you can assign them points. So if any of you use checkmark systems or something like that in your classroom, or some sort of point reward system, you can use this as that reward system. And the best part about it is you can customize the different rewards that you use for different skills. So let's say you have something like a talking out of turn thing, then you can actually use a -1 or some point talking out of turn, and it'll go onto it'll take points out of their bank. If they raise their hand nicely, you give them a 1 point for raising their hand, or if they win points from their project, you can give them project prize 5 points or whatever it is, and they build a bank of points. But the best part is you can share this with their parents. So you can include their parents on the system, and you can send reports, and the reports have charts and graphs that show their day-to-day behavior. So this is what the basic screen looks like. Now this is just a quick thing I made up with one student there, and the whole class, which consists of the one student. They have 1 point there. This guy, Ken, a little blurry there, but Ken has his 1 point, and so you just click on the little Ken icon, and it'll go in there and it'll show you both. It'll show the positive points to click on and the negative. And it looks basically like this. This is what happens when you click on their name. And these are all the positive ones. So you just click it once. You can do this on your phone too. You can actually have it on your phone, and while you're sitting there talking, you can actually boom, 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 click their little avatar, and they can pick their avatar, and it's a little monster they put on there, and it's a neat way to keep track of things, and you don't need to keep check marks on a board or whatever it is that you may do. But the person I know who does this uses it actually as a spending currency. So they have prizes or user points to buy a gym class or something like that, where they where they can spend their points, and provides those neat reports to the parents. Another one, this is one I have used for several years, is the whole idea of a classroom economy. I start this at the beginning of the year, and I run this throughout the year. Now, you could use this in combination. You can use your Dojo points as your classroom, but as your classroom currency. But I like the physical currency, especially with the younger kids. They can pass it back and forth. There's a video here. I'm going to leave that video. If we can get the link in there, I'm going to leave that video for later, because we're gonna be coming up to the end of the time here by the time I finish up. So, but you can check out that video. It's from this website, My Classroom Economy. Now, this website has the base. Now, I will say this: it's from this website. You don't pay for it or anything, but it is sponsored, just as a warning, by or for your information, by Vanguard. I don't know, they're an investment firm, but it's separate from them. It's not meant to draw you in to buy their investment products or anything. But it's got a lot of cool tools, like if you want to make classroom money, they actually have sets of classroom money that you can print off and use. So it's got a lot. It's got some good tips for starting out the classroom economy and everything. So it's just a good website to go to for that. I do not work for Vanguard. Okay, so it looks like this, and you can. There's just a lot of resources on this one to get your economy started. Even if all you want to do is print off the stuff, it works pretty well. So one thing I found about the classroom economy, when we're talking about seeing real life situations, this is basically, the economy is just using money in the classroom to buy and sell. The students have jobs. So, and again, out of curiosity, can you give me a check mark if you have classroom jobs that you use, like paper handout or something like that in your classroom already? Yeah, so I know before I started using a classroom economy, I already had these jobs. Like, I already had people who ran the attendance down. I already had people who would straighten out papers. And I already had people who would hand things out. Like, there were actually jobs assigned for this that I had assigned in my classroom. And so what I did was I just then assigned pay to each of those jobs. And my same group of 3 or whatever that would do this, and I'd rotate students through the jobs. And they would earn money over the course of the week, and they'd use this money to pay rent for their desks, to buy their pencils. If they lost a pencil and I found it on the floor, they'd buy it back from me, or to go to the bathroom, they'd give me a couple bucks to go to the bathroom, or which also helps with your classroom management, by the way, because then they think a lot more when they're spending money. But it also helps them think of using this math, because one of the things I always used to say to students, even before I did a classroom economy, was I would say, think of it like when they're adding or subtracting, say, think of it like money, right? Like when you're adding money, you tend to get it right because you care about it, right? But then when we actually started using money in the classroom, I found that my students' basic facts were actually getting a lot better just through this repeated daily use of, like, buying and selling their art projects from each other, or saving money to pay for their for the possibility of getting hit with the wheel of fate you saw in that earlier on as a project. And we also had things like students would create class banks, and my grade 5s were able to calculate things like percent of in their heads and really fast, because if they were borrowing money from a friend and the friend was charging them 5% a week interest, they could actually do, okay, what's 5% of, and they'd figure it out in their head. By the end of the year, some of my students who struggled with this on tests could rip these things off fast when you're talking to them, and I was actually able to work that into their grade because I could tell they could do it. It was just maybe on a test they had a hard time, focusing on the actual test. It wasn't that they didn't know how to calculate percent of, right? So it also helped me build these connections between how money is used in the classroom. So, like, we'd use, for instance, that bridge project. We had the government money. They would use it to pay for the rewards for the projects, and the money came from our taxes that the students would pay at the end of the week. So we could connect to say, hey, our taxes are 7%. So of your weekly wage, and that money directly goes into money. And then when something like the budget, the Canadian budget that came out today, you can actually talk to them about this. Well, look at this. That's why governments need to raise money so they can do things like build bridges and all this, and it creates these connections, and they can see these world uses of that. So, wow, it looks really small. So like this is like what a simple price list looked like. So I might charge them a $5 finder fee for if their pencil was lost, or a $5 finder fee if I found their eraser on the floor. So it helps students, even as a management tool, begin to think about how to use their materials responsibly and how that impacted them. Running in the hallways, I had a speeding fine, $5. So it's just things they started thinking, and again, doing these transactions, they were able to calculate, like if they give me a 20, they would say, hey, give me 15 back. Or sometimes I'd throw a 10 at them. They'd be like, yeah, that's not right. They could do their calculations fast because it was about the idea, not about thinking through the calculation and going all too deep into the actual calculation. It became natural as they use this daily. So they receive pay for these jobs. The pay is differentiated, so they have different pay to build an inequality into the classroom, because it's kind of neat to show, hey, well, I have the high-paying job this week, I have the low-paying. How does that affect your life? I rotate them through and build this whole idea of saving, because maybe the next time you might lose your job, or you might have less money than you did the week before. So how do you deal with that when it comes to paying the rent on your desk? These kind of things, and they have to think, predict what's going to happen with their money, estimate their earnings, all these different things that come up naturally. I usually try to introduce it right away. Oh, sorry, was that Melanie? Did you want to say something? Is that what the symbol there is for? No, I was just trying to see. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss you. All right, so I usually put 2 to 3 students on each job, so that there's support in there, not just a single person to a job, and yeah, have their wages built into their job. So the jobs look something like this. So these are just it's just basic. It doesn't have to look like this. It's just that I happen to have one year to rotate and you can create more if you need more, if you have a larger class, or but anyway, it looks like this, and this would be a daily pay of 20. Now, as far as the bank goes, you don't have to do this. I used a classroom bank, and it was neat because we actually developed some of the formulas in this. This is an Excel book spreadsheet, and we developed some of these formulas. So they actually went in, and there were algebraic formulas for calculating, like, let's say, I had one that was an interest on bonds, government bond things, and they would actually put their money, and we calculate, okay, how would you write the formula for 5% of X amount of dollars, that kind of thing. And again, these are grade 5s, so they were able to help me create some of the formulas for this book, and the students ran it all. And if you're interested in doing this, you can fire me an email, and I'll email you the Excel bank to you if you wanted to try it. But the students really enjoyed doing this, and I had a lot of comments from parents really liking the natural integration of math and talking about the connections made between, like, social studies and finances and all. Some project ideas I had with this, and I'm wrapping up here, but I was thinking stock markets, because I'm sure most people know what the stock market is. Stocks are basically just, you're buying a fraction of the company. So a project of maybe starting a business and dividing your business and the value of your business into shares of equal size, right? So maybe $2 a share, and there's 10 shares, your company is worth $20, right? So toying around with something like that, building company as a project, building companies, splitting them up, selling pieces to the class. So it's a fraction exercise. Creating private banks, thinking of interest rates, right? What interest rate would you charge? Doing more work with this nonprofit and charity idea within the context of using this classroom economy and integrating, because it's really easy to integrate all these different classes using economy as a backdrop. Because if you think we live within an economy and our art is bought and sold, use math there. When we go to sporting events, we sell tickets. Tickets are are created by, and they have a certain value, and all these things can be linked. You can link your math into some pretty cool projects using this classroom economy. So just to kind of wrap up and take any questions you guys have, I just want to say, think about, first of all, connecting your lessons to life in a way that they focus on the project, and the math is supporting and natural. Because when they care about something, either through their interests, by you sharing your interests, or by using a world sort of a world need, using these to focus your projects will really have that buy-in needed, so that the math isn't the daunting part of it. They're so busy focusing on the project that that the math becomes natural and supporting, and they learn a lot faster. Using that regular schedule, like the sample I showed you earlier, of practicing these, building in this basic fact practice in a way that's fun, and they look forward to, changing up those games, trying different things, and getting them to practice it, so that, again, they're focused. If you think about the games, the same thing. You're focusing on the project. You're not focusing on the math, so the math becomes natural, and they learn it like that. And also, think about maybe using these ideas like the classroom economy or those Dojo points, or something that's a year-long structure in your classroom that builds in this natural practice for students, and that's easily connectable to the world outside. Anyway, that's it. I got 9 minutes here. If there's any questions, let me know right now. We can talk about them. Thank you for listening to me, by the way, especially with my coughing and all that stuff. All right. Well, thank you guys all for listening.
Thank you so much, Chris. That was terrific. If people have questions, feel free to put them in there. Otherwise, I'm going to move on and do an official thank you. That was great. So many hands-on ideas and great resources. Yes, certainly some good websites to head to. Yeah, they were terrific there. I'm going to just stop the recording and then talk to you about feedback.